Now, interestingly, there has been a puzzle. For 2,500 years, no scholar of Sanskrit has been able to crack it. It's a linguistic puzzle which has perplexed all scholars until now, because that man on your screens, Rishi Rajpopat, is the one who's managed to crack it all the way across in Cambridge, has written a thesis which cracks a code which hasn't been cracked so far. So, Rishi, would it be right to call you, I believe, a linguistic genius without power, because literally no one's done what you have done? You must explain to us in simple words, if I may insist on that, what was your Eureka moment? What led to it?
I would call myself a curious student, an inquisitive student, rather than what you described. But thank you for your very kind words. Firstly.
Very humble.
So I started my PhD in 2017 at Cambridge, and the moment I started looking for exact. I was very sure of exactly what I was looking for, and I started looking for that almost immediately. But I spent about 9 months or so doing exactly that, going into my office every day, trying to look for the patterns that I so desperately wanted by the end of the 9th month, as you can imagine. But I made no headway whatsoever. I was that one student who thought, okay, I'm going to quit this field after my PhD and do something else possibly if this doesn't work out. That's how despondent I was. So I decided to spend the summer away from work. I wasn't making any progress. Things were not going anywhere. So I thought I might as well take some time out to enjoy what I'm doing and what's working out, which is swimming, cooking, hanging out with friends, praying, meditating, cycling, that kind of stuff, the stuff I enjoy. So I said, let's take some time out. This will help me in multiple ways. It's going to firstly allow me to refuel and go back, with some more energy. But also when I go back, I might be able to look at things from a fresh, new perspective, through a different prism, possibly. So I was hoping something good would happen. But by the end of that 1 month long break, when I did go back, I wasn't too enthusiastic. I went back begrudgingly because I had to, because that's what you have to do to finally complete your PhD. You have to work. So I go back, I pick up the first book from the stack on my table, and I start flipping the pages.
Which was?
Oh, well, that was just my notebook, in which I had written all the derivations.
Okay.
Yeah, in which I had practiced all the technical stuff, basically. So I flip the pages, I look at the different derivations I had written in my notebook, and almost within minutes, the patterns almost reveal themselves to me, or they become explicit, they become very clear. And within minutes of that, I knew that I had what I essentially needed to complete my PhD, because I was worried even about that. But much more importantly, to solve this absolutely fascinating, challenging, and exciting, almost nail-biting problem. Yeah, that was the Eureka moment, if you'd like to call it that.
But it's very interesting what you did. So you essentially picked up one of the most ancient textbooks. It is from 500 BCE, a work by Panini, the language machine, and you use that to crack this code. So the relevance and wisdom of ancient India till day relevant.
So I was always interested in Panini's grammar because the idea is that it's supposed to run like a machine and help us when you put as the input, when you input the base and the suffix, so the root and the suffix, let's say, it is a machine that automatically gives you as the output grammatically correct word forms.
Okay.
So I found that incredible. I found that very fascinating because remember, there is no other such language machine in the world. So this grammar is an unrivaled one, 2,500 years on. So I wanted to understand exactly how this machine functions. And I realized as I studied Panini's grammar during my undergraduate years outside of college, that a lot of what we thought we knew, we didn't actually know as well. And I'm very fond of details. I'm very fond of precision. I can be very particular about the technicalities, and that really helps. Because that helps you identify exactly which the weak spots are, where your knowledge is not as solid as you'd like it to be. For you to be able to understand in a very robust way the bigger functioning or the infrastructure of the grammar. So
it's interesting that the kind of words that you are using, it's essentially coming down to Sanskrit and linguistic, but the words and the terms that you are using, and you come from an eco background, you were just telling me, it's quite fascinating to see that when it comes to solving puzzles of Sanskrit, you're actually looking at codes, you're looking at equations, you're talking about precision, you're talking about machines.
Well, we do use the metaphor machine for this grammar, because what else can we call it? You know, the very idea of a machine is that it should be able to perform certain tasks by itself, but also consistently and with minimal human intervention. So it should do what it is designed to do, right? And that is precisely what this grammar does. In fact, I think we're doing injustice to Panini when we are calling it a grammar, because it's a lot more sophisticated and a lot more ambitious than your ordinary grammar of, say, Hindi, Marathi, English, or French.
Okay.
Because it does much more than just describe language. It gives us an entire mechanistic infrastructure to derive words.
You must explain to us, Rishi, because it's important for us to understand. It is a puzzle that you set out to crack. Many people would say that there is a problem, here's a problem, 2,500, no scholar till date has cracked it. Many people would be dissuaded by that very fact. What got you to set your eyes on trying to crack that, and the 9 months of horror, hell, sweat, blood, tears that you would have spent over it?
So, what really worked in my favor is that not all scholars, and I'm talking about all kinds of scholars within the university, outside the university, or more traditional scholars, a lot of them were very complacent with the kind of knowledge that we had about the system. Okay. So they weren't really looking for a better answer. Okay. And then I came along and I said, well, there has to be a better answer, because I cannot accept the answer that we've got right now. It's full of inconsistencies and problems. And I can go over the technicalities with you if you like.
Well, that would be interesting. However, I'm not quite sure I'll get all of it, but you must explain to us, how will this, your thesis, help in revolutionizing the entire study of Sanskrit from here onwards?
So I can tell you one of the things that this finding will do, now that we've got a very simple, elegant, teachable algorithm to run this grammatical machine, we can teach Panini's grammar to the computer.
Okay.
What we will have to do for that is, of course, combine the speaker's intent with the rules of Panini's grammar, and that essentially should be able to help the computer produce human speech in the Sanskrit language. Now that, I think, would be a milestone if achieved in the intellectual history of India, and also in the history of human interaction with computers. So that is one very significant ramification.
So that's going to be very interesting. So we can actually teach Sanskrit, because that's one of the complicated languages. As you yourself said, it's very different, even the kind of language and the enunciation. In fact, if I'm not wrong, you've taught us essentially how you have the perfect algorithm to put two words together, isn't it? If you can just explain that bit.
Rather, two parts of
a word.
The same word together.
Yes.
Yeah. So let me give you an example from English. We're going to use this analogy. We want to derive a word which we want to derive definition, for example. Okay, so we start with define and we add the suffix ation, which is also present in combination, creation, etc.
Absolutely,
right?
Yes.
So define plus ation, but the final word is not definition; it's definition.
Definition, yes.
So you notice there are certain sound changes occurring.
Absolutely.
And those sound changes occur over a series of steps. You do it one by one, right? And each rule is supposed to teach you one sound change. And each rule applies, so at each step you apply one rule. Now imagine this only in the context of Sanskrit. But this is an analogy from English. Now let me tell you exactly what the problem was. What happens very often is, at the same step of this derivation of the words like definition, what used to happen is two rules would become simultaneously applicable. So one rule was saying change.
Answers.
Yes, and that's not acceptable. Besides, you can't even move forward in the derivation without deciding which of the two to choose, right? Because you have to follow one path.
Absolutely.
For the machine to work properly. Right. So you have to choose one rule. The question is, which of these two rules do you choose? Now, Panini the extraordinary genius that he was, obviously he taught us what to do, because he's given us clear instructions about what to do. He's a very practical man, very efficient at communicating things to us. So he taught us only one rule though. This is the genius. This is the genius of Panini. He taught us one rule, 142. It's called Vipratishedhe Param Karya. Don't worry too much about the words. Now that rule was interpreted by the tradition in a way which was incorrect. And the first commentator interpreted that incorrectly, which meant that if they followed that advice, if they followed their interpretation of this rule 1.4.2 to choose one of the two rules that are simultaneously applicable, often they would end up getting the grammatically incorrect form at the end of the derivation.
Okay.
Now, what good is a grammatical machine if it gives you grammatically incorrect forms, right?
Answers, yeah.
Yeah. So what they did is they came up with even more rules to help fix the problem of these two rules being simultaneously applicable. But instead of solving things, those extra rules that they created after Panini's time only ended up complicating matters further.
Okay.
So now you had an even bigger headache, and however, lots of scholars were completely happy with this headache. I wasn't. And I said, I want something simple, and I want this to work like a real machine, not a crumbling building that we're sort of keeping together. It should not look like some broken construction site. That was the idea. That's so, and my philosophy is, if Panini, writing in 500 BC, and once you look at his rules, you realize he's an absolute genius. He's not an idiot, and he's not a negligent man at all.
It's interesting, Rishi, because your thesis, I believe, is named In Panini We Trust. I believe it can also alternately be named Don't Mess with Panini. Don't mess with what he taught us. And
don't mess with him at all. Absolutely.
And Rishi, I must say, it may be a bad joke, but you are very rightly named by your parents, Rishi, to have cracked something like this. You are very aptly named. In retrospect, it's a perfect name for you. And everyone will, in India, like literally everyone here is saying that Rishi, world's envy, India's pride. But you must tell us, what is the big takeaway from your struggles for other scholars who literally midway through would want to give up? Because you've seen that phase. You've seen that phase when you're done with it and you want to just give up. I just want to go out, cycle, cook and meditate, and I do not want to look at another code for a time. How did you get back to it?
So let's think about it this way. Surely Panini, when he wrote these 4,000 rules, he also took breaks. Or let's hope he was human enough to take those breaks. And yet he went back to his work and he came up with this fantastic machine. In 500 BC, when he had such little access, if at all, to the sorts of amenities and luxuries that we do. So if he could do something so spectacular back then, he is, of course, our intellectual ancestor, our civilizational ancestor.
Yes.
Then why can't we? So that is the spirit. And I think if we imbibe that spirit, work hard, take pride in what our ancestors have achieved, and try to outdo them, then I don't think that anything is impossible. So that's my message. And I truly believe it because I've lived through it during my PhD, as you can imagine.
Absolutely. And at 27, you've cracked a code that people for 2,500 years have failed to do that. Many, many congratulations, Rishi. This is a feat which is completely unparalleled. But we are not just excited about now. We are even more excited about what this means in the study of Sanskrit. Your path-breaking breakthrough that you have made, what it means for in future of Sanskrit studies. That is something that is really going to energize the entire field. Thank you so much, Rishi, for speaking to us.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you.